Carl?
Today's guest is Nancy Hogshead. She's a two-time Olympian, a three-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming, a civil rights lawyer, and the CEO of Champion Women, an organization providing legal advocacy for girls and women in sports. Arguably, one of the most forceful and unapologetic supporters of the possibilities inside women's sports, equality, Title IX, and fairness at every level. Nancy has clearly found and grasped her calling. And we couldn't be happier to have you on the show, Nancy. Welcome to the Best Boss Ever podcast series.
Oh, thank you, Carl. Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, since none of us gets to where we are by ourselves, we always have a support crew. And the essence of the show was really for you to share with our audience who, or perhaps more than one who, was the best boss or mentor or influencer you've had along the way, and how those learnings supported your efforts in getting you to arrive at where you are at this moment in time.
Yeah. Well, first, again, thanks for having me on and getting me thinking more and more about this. I'm going to start with my swimming career and then go on to my civil rights career. I would say one of the best mentors that I had was Randy Reese. He was my coach at the age of 11. My family moved here to Jacksonville, Florida, into the house that I just bought last summer. And he was the one who said, you know, Nancy, if you want to be great, you can be great, but you're going to have to do it, right? And so I've heard that first part, I can be great. Then there was all the work that it was going to be, and he was really unrelenting. There really was no reason to skip practice. There was no reason to not have a great practice, to do what you needed to do during the day so that either first thing in the morning or middle of the afternoon when you're lifting weights or afternoon that you're having a great practice, that you're getting the most that you can out of it. And he sort of instilled in me this idea that I was a really good athlete. And I think like once you have this idea about yourself, then it's easy to kind of, transfer it over. And let me tell you like key ways that it helps. One is the issue of making sure you don't get injured. So every athlete is right on the cusp of either getting sick or injured, right? So you really got to take care of your body. You really got to take care of yourself. And so just knowing where that line was, and for people who don't trust that they really are a very good athlete and that they really are a very hard worker, they feel bad about having to say no. And they have to be able to say no, and they have to, be able to talk with their coach about, okay, maybe I kicked today because the shoulder's hurting, or just knowing the difference, different kinds of pain between good pain and bad pain. So I was world class between the ages of 14 to 22. And after the age of 16, I didn't get injured again. So two things. Number one is I kind of learned, right, like what was good pain, what was bad pain. And then two is I gave myself permission to say no, and I had a coach that gave me permission to say no. And I look at sports with really high injury rates and how the sport can develop in such a way that, the athlete's always wrong, that they're not able to trust themselves, that they have to trust somebody else. I think that always really, it helped me a lot with learning. So that was kind of, step one, when I was younger. And, my coach, before I move on, one of the things that he talked to me about was there's something called being coachable. And coachable doesn't mean that you take somebody blindly and just do whatever they say. It is allowing somebody else into your world to make you better. So it's trusting that person. It is it is like, you've got an alliance with somebody else. So every coach I ever had said I was like one of like the most coachable people. And I think it's because a couple things. Number one is I have a very good kinesthetic sense. So they could say, get your elbow up or pick your chin or whatever. And I could do it. Right. Whereas I've coached people, and I'm sure you have too, Carl, that you try to tell somebody pick your elbow up and they just can't. Right? Have you had that experience?
Well, yeah. I mean, I live it in my own self every day. I mean, I do like to play golf, right?
Yeah.
So that's something you never master. You just don't. But there are things you can learn and do along the way. But you have to have that kinesthetic, that ability to read Ben Hogan's book and take a hip move first and finish a golf swing, right?
Right.
And so many people can't. And I struggle with that myself. You know, years and years and years of training in both swimming and water polo. And, you know, one would think, just like you're talking about the awareness of self and the ability to take a word or a phrase and convert it to an action,
Right.
easier said than done.
Right. So there's a couple things in what you just said. One is there's this effect of some people inherently push back on what the coach says, and I wasn't one of those. So I could absorb what it was that they were at least trying to tell me, at least trying to teach me. So there is that, and it's kind of giving somebody else permission to really get in there and hold you to account, hold you to a very high standard. I tell this story regularly about how so in swimming training, the hard part of the year, and we always joked at water polo players, we're nowhere near in our world, right? Right. So in swimming, the hard part of the year, we swam 800 laps a day. So my peers that did not go into civil rights, but instead went into coaching, told my age peer group that we swam at the wrong time. So in my era, it was all about more, more, more. And now they're much more targeted. They know what they're doing. Anyway, that is to say that 800 laps and just under 14 miles of swimming, a sprinter swimmer swims longer than a marathon runner because you don't have two things that they do, which is heat and gravity. So, that's a long way of saying I had swum, for weeks and weeks, had been swimming my 800 laps, and I was just drop dead tired. And so Randy Reese says, "Hey, Nancy, I want you to do a 50 backstroke against Stacy Anderson." Now, I'm not a backstroker. I was an IMer, but Stacy's a backstroker. And also, she had not come to morning practice. So, and as far as I was concerned, had not like killed it the way I had in practice. Anyway, so we do this 50 backstroke. 50 back is just 2 laps, and she wins. And under my breath, not very loud, I say, "I don't care." Huge mistake. Because, this was a time when my coach really got in there, and he pulls me up by my suit and he's yelling at me and he's, saying all kinds of names. And if I didn't have that sense that, number one, he was on my side, and number two, that I really was a good athlete, I don't know as I could have taken that. Or, I would have felt bad about myself, or I would have felt bad about him. You're abusive, you're whatever. But because, number one, I had very high goals. If you don't want to win in the Olympics, that's ridiculous to be swimming 800 laps a day. And then two is, I kind of had given him permission to kind of get in there. So the truth was, I really didn't care. I really, felt like I had done enough. I felt like, okay, You don't need to do anymore.
Right.
But it's only
It's
going to get you so far.
exactly. And so,
Yeah.
this is going to be way too inside for anybody that's not a swimmer, but you, in your own words, you swam at the wrong time because you were in the midst of what we called the Mark Schubert Mission Viejo effect, which was massive yardage. I mean, I swam for George Haynes, Nancy, at the peak. I was a 400 diameter, 200 diameter, so quote unquote, I got the half hour in the middle of the day with the 1,500-meter folk, right?
Yeah.
Soaking wet, literally soaking wet. We would go 12,000 meters in a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe 13, and then everybody was pissed and throwing stuff and going, what, you're going 20,000 yards a day? So let's just lay that at the feet of Mark Schubert and move on, because
Right.
obviously things have become much more, in your words, targeted and focused. And you don't need to go much further than Gary Hall Jr. to figure out that
Yeah.
you do not need 20,000 yards a day.
No. No. And the swimmers now, like I went to Olympic trials, they look happier. They
Right.
look more alive. They, my primary memory of growing up was that I was tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, understandably
I
so.
was.
You were.
Yeah. Right. So,
Well, listen, multiple gold medals, two-time Olympian. There
hold
just
on
aren't
now.
that
I
many.
didn't move on to, you want me to talk about coaches like in my civil rights work?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the athletic background, I think, gives you the discipline, the perseverance, the understanding that when you get to a wall,
Yeah.
you actually have the ability to go through the
Right.
obstacle, whatever it might be, right? And
Right.
that's the benefit and beauty of being a world-class athlete, is you learn things by doing, and in some instances by not doing, and then you see what not doing doesn't get you, so you're back to doing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So as you exit your athletic career, you decide to go to law school, right?
Right.
So give us a sense of why you became a lawyer, and then let's talk specifically about those influencers, mentors that guided you or impacted you, that
Mhm.
got you to where you are.
Sure. Um, so, and I think that it's a gift to be able to find and to have mentors. If you're not coachable, you're not going to find them, right? And if you're not, sort of if you don't know where you're going, then you're not. It's much, much harder to find those coaches. So I would say one of my major coaches has been really a peer at this point. Her name's Donna Lopiano, and she was head of the Drake Group, and she, for years and years, was head of the Women's Sports Foundation. So when I turned 24 years old, I was on the board of the Women's Sports Foundation. I remember sitting next to her, and um, I volunteered for the Women's Sports Foundation for about 26 years, and I wrote so many white papers, and something would happen with the media, and you got to work until a certain time. So I'll give you an example: is the Bush White House had um, they had tried to weaken Title IX. The wrestlers had come together and they had filed a lawsuit against the Department of Education. They had and they had gotten the president, George W. Bush, to start this commission on opportunities in athletics, but it really should have been called the Commission to Weaken Title IX. So we so like all of a sudden we get the news that day, and Donna says, okay, you work on it until 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll pick up from there. And I was like, Donna, I am pregnant with twins. And, it's hard. I mean, she had no empathy whatsoever. Like, we got to get this done. And anyway, so, we get it done. It was hard. But, just it's somebody who's willing to give you opportunities. I mean, she has given me so many amazing opportunities and demanded the best from me. Um, and there's just nothing better than that. I've got several mentors, but Richard Lapchick is another one. He just retired from University of Central Florida, where he ran the sports business program there, the MBA business program. And he's a civil rights giant, and he's just been instrumental in sort of nudging me in particular ways. Um, and I really appreciate those mentors that can see the possibility in you and give you the opportunity to do good work.
Yeah, and were there items or learnings or you talked about the 1 a.m. episode, which is
Yeah, yeah.
pretty amazing in itself. But could you grab one or two or three really key learnings that not only you require of yourself in your daily programming today, but that you would suggest or recommend to aspiring youth, if you will, to grab these things because they're real and they're tangible and they work?
Yeah. So align yourself. Okay, my mom had this saying that I highly recommend, which is you want to aspire to be the dumbest person in the room. Now, she knew we were all smart. So my brother went to Harvard. My sister and I both went to Duke. My dad's an orthopedic surgeon. He's kind of a rock star in his field. So, there's no shortage of IQ points around. So again, her point of saying this is, kind of do what you can to try to hang out with because the smart people are going to help you do better. And that's one of the reasons why I went to work for a big law firm, a major law firm, right when I got out of law school, is because at Holland and Knight, that was the firm, they're still going strong, is nothing went out unless it was perfect, perfect. There was no casual, okay, I'll see you at noon. It was and just having such high standards and seeing the difference between that and people who didn't either work for a judge or work for a big firm, not having that mentoring system really, I think, hurt them. So never be afraid to go backwards before you go forwards, right? So when I first started in law, I was coming from like, the other clients and would come into the office. Oh my gosh, I want to meet Nancy Hogshead, and I'm gonna get a book signed by her and stuff like that. But I was low person on the totem pole. I was, taking in discovery, and I was, writing the memo to make sure a certain piece of evidence could get admitted during trial. I was, all those kinds of things. But my gosh, am I ever grateful that I had those experiences, that I was able to do it. And I will say that I think for all the bosses out there, so in sports, it's really, once you learn it, it's really clear when to work and when to rest. And in business, in the workforce, it is not so clear. I find it really hard. Like after something is just, I write a white paper or a memo to the Department of Education, and then to pull back, I find it hard sometimes to, know where that balance is still to this day.
Yeah, the work-life balance thing is huge. And
Right. When I was swimming, there was no work-life balance.
exactly.
Right?
No, we all get that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. But
But
now, right,
yeah,
with
as a
kids
mom,
and
especially,
yeah,
so you just used an example. You're pregnant with twins, and the work doesn't stop. In fact, the work is urgent, so it can't stop. And then as the years go on, you sort of, at least I know this to be true about not only myself but others, my colleagues and peers over time.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to not really understand when to say no. Like you do. Okay, I'm tired. I'm hey Randy, I need a break. This is why, and he knows because he put you through the paces. But in business life, particularly in large law firms, as an aspiring sort of newly minted lawyer, you not only bottom of the totem pole, but all of the files end up on your desk for
Right.
something. So
Right.
learning that work-life balance is actually a learned skill, not an innate one,
That's so true.
right?
Yeah, right, right. It's like in sports, it's just learning like where the line is between, just enough, but not too much, is I think the line is much clearer than it is in life,
Well, I
to
think
be
that's
able
right.
to make it up. Yeah.
Right.
No, I used to affirmatively try to make sure that when I got home that I wasn't spent from work, right? So, and I got home pretty early, tried to get home by 5:30, and right that I didn't need to go, right? That I could like be fully present with the kids and the household and what it needed there. Yeah,
Right.
not easy.
Before we go to champion women, because
Hmm.
that's really a very cool thing, and I want you to elaborate on that, and then catch us up on, the current state of affairs. You and I talked a little bit about it off camera, but one of the things you wrote in your chapter, and I actually, when our newsletter goes out, I'm gonna include the link to your chapter because it's
Oh,
so
nice.
good.
Thank
But
you.
you mentioned a thing that really amazed me, and that
Mhm.
was you went through a 2.5 year period where you did not improve.
Right.
And so, when in your career did that occur? And, mere mortals would have quit after 6 months of not improvement, let alone 30 months of no improvement. What the heck?
Right. Right. Um, I'm thinking now it actually might have been a little bit longer. But so my freshman year in college, didn't improve. I was working hard, but school was certainly taking a lot more work than what was required in high school. Um, yeah, that took a little, kind of figuring out. And So it was that time, and then my sophomore year in college, I was out for a run. Duke has two campuses, East and West, and I was out for a run in between the two of them. And I kind of had like ding, ding, ding about the person that was running towards me, but I didn't give myself permission to be rude. And when he asked me like, "Where's Duke University?" and I stopped just for a second to kind of, well, that's a weird question because you're right in the middle of Duke. And he grabbed me, and then centrifugal force pulled me around, and I was raped for about 2.5 hours. So wouldn't wish it on anybody. And It really took me quite a while to unpack the whole thing, just because number one, the kind of Christianity that I had up until that point was that if you are good, then good things will happen to you. And like, what could I possibly have done to be raped for 2.5 hours? And then also, I didn't understand how sexism and patriarchy and misogyny worked. I really just thought that I wasn't the type of person that was ever going to be raped. I mean, first of all, on the scale of strong women, everybody out there can go do a Google search of Nancy Hogshead muscle, and you will see, an amazing picture by Heinz Klutmeyer of, right, I'm so strong. and so much even stronger than my peers in swimming. And I lifted more than anybody else, and I was just I have a certain muscle type that grows as opposed to most women don't. And so, here I was so strong, and like I have to tell you, the fight was not close. And it really shocked me at how not close that it was. Um, it has been this great pathway to learning all about how the brain works. Everything was in slow motion, and I didn't understand that until, just a few years ago about like, oh, the brain is sort of going at high speed. I mean, for me, it was a fight to the death.
Right.
And for him, it was just a fight.
Right.
He's just a big guy. He's just 6 feet, 200 pounds.
Right.
He's nowhere near Carl as big as you are. He wasn't as big as 99% of my teammates.
Right.
And so, just kind of seeing how women's lives are so shaped by male violence, even the most privileged and the strongest and somebody who can afford to live places that don't have high rape or high male violence areas. It still, I will always have a big dog. There's certain things that because of that it really, really, I had what now everybody would know as a great case of PTSD. Nobody knew what PTSD was back then. All I knew was that it was just impossible to feel safe, right? I could be with a group of people. I could be in the safest environment. And I had this sense that chaos and upset was just right around the corner, that I always had to like be careful.
Right. Kind of don't know what's around the corner, but your mind and your experience is telling you it's not good.
Correct. Yeah. Right. My mind. And like in the past, I had never had a problem when I would tell myself to calm down. Right. When I would tell myself, you're fine. Right. So to not be able to trust your own mind is difficult, to say the least. So,
whoa.
Yeah.
It's almost.
We could do the whole thing on the rape.
We could do a whole thing on that.
But it let me know that until life got better for all women, it was not going to get better for me. Mm. That, in other words, you can't outrun sexism. You can't out-achieve out of it. That's not to say that women don't achieve and don't do amazing things, and they don't create and produce, etc. But I really got that it wasn't personal. That I needed to make sure that other women had the same opportunities, that sexism wasn't stopping them, not just male violence, but all kinds of sexism on employment and pregnancy and harassment and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it wasn't stopping them from achieving. Yeah.
So, two things. One, you made a comment that at that moment, the kind of Christianity you had been raised with either went away or changed or morphed or.
Oh yeah, no, it had to morph because you're right. I mean, I don't think God. That's just an absurd idea. The fact that like if you're good things will happen, right? But I mean, I know that now. Like the difference between a 19-year-old and is enormous. But I had to come to have a different relationship with God, and I had to. But it really forced me, because there for a while I really felt, given where I came from, I really felt forsaken.
Well, yeah. And we both know that that's not true. That is not the
Right,
truth.
right. But again, like there's something
Right.
intellectually, I knew it wasn't true, but that's not how I felt. I really
Exactly.
felt like how on earth could this happen to me when I'm so strong and I'm so good and I was on such a safe path and I've run this way and everybody runs on this path and etc.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously a moment and an experience that the gravitas is enormous.
Yeah.
Very, well, not very few, but thank you for sharing that because that's an amazing story. But so taking that and taking all of right into account your legal career,
Right.
that moment really focused you on
Right.
what you've now coined champion women.
Right.
So share with us the creation of champion women, the role that you play as the CEO,
Mhm.
and the mission and the vision, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. So I started Champion Women 10 years ago this year because I looked out at the rest of my career and I thought, what what can I do to get the biggest bang for the buck, right? What can I do to get change to scale? And I have to say that even knowing about sexism, that I really underestimated it. I really thought, particularly when it came to just simple things like equal opportunities in sports, equal scholarship dollars, equal recruiting dollars, that we would be so much further ahead. I spent a lot of my career making sure that girls and women had equal rights, but actually making sure that they have those rights enforced and that it's happening on the ground is another story. It's another issue. So I wanted, so that's one of the reasons why I started Champion Women is I could have been doing the cases, but I didn't like you can and I think the history of Champion Women will show that you can get so much more done if you're doing the policy stuff, if you're doing the one who is writing the papers. And another thing that sports taught me is being able to get a team around you that, right, to have the people around you that can make it work. And I was, amazingly lucky in my swimming career, unbelievably lucky in my professional career, just the people around. And so gathering, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 800 Olympians and Paralympians to fight for a particular position in Congress, as you did with the Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, to be able to do that, if I was a for-profit lawyer, I could not do that. We really depend on people donating to get this work done. Some of the work, let's see, the work in order to change the Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act that governs all of, it's about 16 million athletes. It's about double the size of the athletes, the number of athletes that participate in school-based sports. So that's high schools and colleges. And when you, that statute, we made the first piece of legislation gave the Olympic and Paralympic Committee a legal duty to protect athletes from physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, and it extended statute of limitations. It gave a ground floor for damages of 150,000. It and it created sort of an HR department, as I like to refer to it, as the United States Center for Safe Sport, that can't get an athlete any money and it can't put somebody in prison. All it can do is remove them from the Olympic movement. So being able to take that skill set of being able to, I've been teaching law for, gosh, probably 25 years now. And so being able to take that teaching set to, explain what I just did with the Amateur Sports Act or with Title IX or, right, to be able to do that, and then get that policy change that we need to have. So, so two pieces of legislation. The second piece gives athletes more power. So, Carl, you were responsible for getting athletes 20% of the vote for the AAC. We then got it up to 33%. It doesn't need to be within a 10-year athlete because we thought that we wanted people who are older and more sophisticated and had been in the system for a longer time.
Right.
Right. But also to make sure that they have seats at the table, that they have a seat at the table at all the boards and all the committees, that they are part of the decision making that's going on. One of the reasons why Larry Nassar happened, you may know that I was the expert witness in the civil cases, that in that case, those athletes, number one, they couldn't say no. They had unbelievably high injury rates, that they usually were done with their careers at age, 17, 18, 19. Right. And people thought that was because that was the sport. But now we know with Simone Biles, no, that's what happens when you can't say no. So if you can't say no to overtraining, of course you can't say no to a sexual molester, an abuser. So Athlete A, that I hope everybody sees, was produced by Jen Say. Athlete A is Maggie Nichols, who was the first person to actually formally complain about Larry Nassar, and right. And consequently did not make the 2016 Olympic team. Everybody should know who Maggie Nichols is. She's just a hero. So anyway, it's on Netflix. You can watch it.
Athlete A. Pay attention, everybody.
Yeah, really good stuff. Anyway, so I wanted to take the skill set and be able to get change to scale. So our three areas are equal opportunities. We filed 101 complaints with the Department of Education back in 2023. We made them better in 2024. We made them more detailed and came up with all this way to do graphs and all the statistics and everything. And then sexual harassment and abuse in sport, which requires giving athletes power. If they are powerless, they're not they're going to be abused.
Yeah, they can't say no.
They have to be able to say no. Yeah.
Right.
And then third is making sure that women's sports stays for women. That we want to make sure that transgender athletes have a place to be able to compete, that they feel comfortable, that they feel, validated and accepted, but not in the women's category. And I should say, these are only men that identify as transgender, not just, right? There are literally dozens of women, females, who identify as transgender. And as long as they're not taking testosterone, as long as they're not taking performance-enhancing drugs, great, then come on and compete in the women's category, which is where they compete. Even though it does not match their gender identity, it is where they want to compete. So we need to make sure that the same thing can happen with males.
Well, so that, at the risk of opening some version of Pandora's box here, that leads to the very public case of swimmer, since we're on a swimming bent here, Leah Thomas, and the consequences of that allowance by the NCAA, the rise of Riley Gaines, literally standing up and saying, "Not on my watch." Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So the question for Nancy Hogshead, lawyer extraordinaire and advocate for all things fair and equal in women, why does it take literally an executive order 3 weeks ago for the NCAA to finally come down and say, you know what? The Leah Thomas episode will never happen again.
Yeah. It's so those of us who are particularly in swimming. So Carl and I were talking about this before we went on air. Swimming and track and field. We train together. We compete together. We go to the same competitions. It's usually a woman than the men's event, and so we always had men and women in lanes and working out together. So we know the differences between men and women. More so, I don't think it's possible for a softball player or a soccer player to really to grasp those differences between those two the way that swimmers do. So we had the same coach. We lifted the same weights. It
Right.
was not a matter of socioeconomics or lack of resource. We had the same resources that the men did. And frankly, it's insulting to me to say, oh, women would be 10% better if they worked harder or they, whatever it is. It's like, what are you saying? Like there was somebody out there in the world that just didn't get an opportunity and they would have been, give me a break. I mean, we don't say that to male athletes that,
Right.
you could have gone 10% faster if you just worked a little harder. I mean, it's just absurd how, to do that. Secondly, I was part of I grew up and I swam from 1976 to 1984. That was right at the height of when the East Germans were taking drugs. And
Yes.
during that, yeah,
Yeah.
during that time,
Montreal. The East
yeah,
German women team showed up looking literally like men.
right. And guess what? None of those administrators, none of the adults in the room stood up for us,
Right.
for athletes. Just the opposite, we were told, just as Riley Gaines was told, just as the whole UPenn swimming team was told, which is if you complain, you're on a bus home. So, like was literally silenced. And it's just, so even though I don't think the transgender people are literally cheating, the same way that, and, some people would say, oh, well, the East Germans, they didn't know that they were taking drugs. I don't care. It was unfair. We all knew it was going on. We were not cheating. They were. And so it was not a fair playing situation. And even though they were so doped up, I mean, as you just said, they walked in, coming in, looking, taking enough testosterone with, facial
Oh, yeah.
hair and, right, and, looking like men. They looked enough like men. And unfortunately, they went on to go have really horrible pregnancies and children with birth defects and all kinds of health problems as a result of taking all those drugs. But um, those those women who were taking all the drugs were nowhere near as fast as the men. They
Right.
were a little bit faster than women, but they were not, and that's what we see today with females who identify as transgender. If they compete in the men's category, they are not competitive at all, not even a little bit.
Correct.
So some pretend like they were not competitive. So it's a kind of a one-way street. It's only allowing, if you think that you can have men competing in women's sports, it's a one-way street,
Right.
right? It's only men coming in. I was just having this debate with another lawyer today, and she was saying like, oh, we should come up with something besides sex as a way to have different sport categories. And I was like, well, how would you do that in a way that gives half the population, women, an equal opportunity in sport? How would you, like, what, based on wingspan or what, how would you do that? And the answer is you cannot.
Right.
That there is no, Brian Lochte and Missy Franklin had the same wingspan, they were the same height, they did the same workouts, they had the access to the best facilities and best coaching in the world, And, big shock. He was 11% faster than she was
Right. Big
because
shock.
he's male. Right, exactly.
Right.
So I don't know. Did you feel the same way, Carl?
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
it was, we watched it unfold on television, we watched it unfold in the courtroom, we watched it unfold on the nightly news. You bring a perspective, Nancy, with your background in the initiative of Champion Women that I'm not going to say is lost, because it's certainly not lost, but the voices you represent in your voice are so powerful and so accurate and right on that it sort of begs the question, as I asked earlier, why the NCAA and the administrators, to your point, the adults in the room, whether it's the NCAA or whether it's the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, on the back of the absurdity that went down in Paris last summer. I don't, I profess, I do not understand why intelligent adults in the room don't see this as a very clear black and white issue. I just don't.
Yeah. I think you could think that only if you didn't understand sports at all. But once you once you understand sports, when Leah Thomas was competing, we got the NCAA. So first of all, I called a Zoom meeting and we had to like triple the size of the. Were you on that meeting back in 2022?
I was not.
No. So, and we got like 580 Olympians and Paralympians to sign on saying that women's sports should be for women. And then so many national team athletes and college athletes and high school athletes, et cetera, right, who, and parents and coaches and right, who all said this, it's a binary. We need to do it this way. And, but anyway, the NCAA said, you know what? We're going to give this decision making over to the national governing bodies. Well, guess what? Because of me, frankly, swimming, we were able to get USA Swimming to change like that.
Right.
And then World Aquatics also changed like that. But then the NCAA did a rewind and they said, oh, but it has to go through one of our committees first. Well, I mean, some of the people they had on their committee were true believers in gender, not sex. Gender is like the social construct of what it means to be male and female. And so like nothing was going to get through that. So even though, right, we did all the work, USA Swimming, World Aquatics, it didn't matter. The NCAA was still going to stick to their guns. We had lots of meetings with the NCAA, and I said I was in the room when these decisions were being made about inclusion for transgender athletes, for males who identify as transgender. And we were told that if somebody went on gender affirming hormones, that's what they called it, for a year, but lowering testosterone for a year, that then somebody would move laterally. Now we know that's not true. It was never true. But
and it's never going to be true.
Right. But I believed it because the people that were telling me that I thought had the authority to know. Well, now, there's so much research and science out there that will tell you it's just not possible for somebody to have surgery or to take drugs for any amount of time to lose what they get either from being male, XY, or from male puberty. You just can't roll that back.
Right.
But even pre-puberty, there's substantial differences between, not as big, but still, big enough so that if you want to give girls equal opportunities in sports, they have to have their own team.
100% correct. And by the way, you've written many chapters, I'm using this metaphorically, to get the collective to where it is right now. And clearly there are many more chapters to be written. And I dare say that Nancy Hogshead will continue to be the lead author, the lead advocate, in your own words, the unapologetic voice for this issue, because it still has a fair amount of runway yet to be traveled, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not clearly over as yet. But thank you,
Yeah.
your teams, and the 800 plus Olympians that you've galvanized around this issue, because it's so important. And
Yeah.
we'll
Can
leave
I,
it there. We'll
yeah,
leave it
well,
there because there's a lot more. Well, no,
well,
you get the
yeah,
last
I
word.
just want to say just two more points. One is who's to blame for this, for the current executive powers that are unapologetically anti-trans? Who's to blame for that? Is it me for asking for women's sports and women's spaces like rape crisis shelters, like places where women can go that are free from male violence, prison cells and hospital wards and things like that? Um, is it me? I would say that the fault lies in an overreach. There was a political decision
Yes.
to have males come into women's sports and spaces if, as a civil rights issue, they had instead focused on life, focused on academics and employment and, being accepted in the world. Throughout history, like when you have a civil rights cause, you almost always see, over time, it gets better and better. And just the opposite. The more people saw men in women's sports, the less supportive of that they became. And so now we're up to 80% of the general public is not supportive. And again, I put this on the trans advocates that had a strategy where they tried to say the trans men were men, or I'm sorry, I meant to say the opposite. Trans women were women. Right? You've all heard it. Trans
Right.
women are women. It's just not true that they're
Right.
women, that they're us.
Right.
And so I have not seen it yet, but I'm hoping that the trans community gets it together, and if they don't go into women's sports and spaces, if they don't demand that their rights require women to give up their right to single sex changing spaces, to women's sports, I think they're going to go a lot longer way in the big arc of life.
Right. Right. Well, lots more to come. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to pivot a little bit here. I have asked every single guest on the podcast series these three fun, simple questions. So it's we call it the hot list, right? So
Mm-hmm.
here's question one: the favorite mistake, your favorite mistake. This is, none of us like to acknowledge necessarily mistakes we've made, but we all make them. I mean, and we're going to make more going forward. But what's the one mistake you would call out as the one you made, and then how you rectified or recovered from it?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but just not appreciating the force that sexism is. I thought when I was, you know, 20, 25 years old, that just, as soon as people knew what, as soon as the case law was really clear, as soon as we had the regulations that we needed, as soon as we convinced, I thought it would happen. And that's just not true. We filed 101 complaints with Department of Education, and the gap between men's and women's sports, women need 77% more scholarship dollars than they currently have. And that's despite having good statutes, good regulations, and good case law. It's just not happening, at the regular level. Women need 50% more athletic opportunities to equal what it is that schools are giving men. So my big mistake was not appreciating that it would just happen. And so when I started Champion Women is when I I have, we started writing letters 10 years ago to these schools, and it was like free legal work that we were doing. And it didn't do anything. So that's why we went to the Department of Education. If that doesn't work, we'll bump it up a notch.
Right. Well, that's a big one. And obviously the work continues, the fight continues, the letter writing continues, and good for you. Number two, this is kind of a fun one. The favorite live concert that you ever attended that featured a female artist or a female-led band? Now, we're talking live here.
Right. Oh, that one's so easy for me. It's Taylor Swift. So my daughter, I have twin girls, and one of them is a major Swiftie. There's probably, I'm guessing, 200 different pictures in her room right now. My daughter's written amazing articles about Taylor Swift. And when you go see her, she really is next level.
Right.
I mean, wow, is she good? And is it positive energy? And it's just amazing. So I've been to 5 concerts now. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So one, no surprise. You're not the first to say Taylor Swift is an answer to that question. Two,
Yeah.
I know several people who couldn't get tickets here in the U.S. They're in the Northeast. So when Taylor opened in Stockholm on the European leg of her tour, I know a half a dozen people who got on planes and flew to Stockholm because they could get a ticket in a very cool venue and see, the Eras tour as it opened in Europe. So it's a thing.
So, yeah, the reason why your friends couldn't get tickets is because Taylor figured out she doesn't want the middleman to be getting the right. So people buy all the tickets and you buy it from the third party. So she tracks like how much her fans engage with her work, and you get a score, and then you get to buy tickets from there. And that's why we've always been able to get those tickets, is all because my daughter is recognized as a major fan.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
there you go,
That's
folks.
Taylor's part.
That's how you get a Taylor Swift ticket.
Well, that's how you're Taylor Swift, right? She really appreciates and really, just her doing that has saved us probably thousands of dollars.
Oh,
That's
no
what
doubt.
she wants, right?
No doubt.
She doesn't,
I mean,
yeah.
you look at the aftermarket or the secondary market for any Taylor Swift concert, and you're talking thousands and thousands per ticket, right? I mean, it's just a thing. It is what it is. Okay, so the last one, it's sort of the pithy one. Words really matter. What we say, what we don't say, words, phrases. So do you have a favorite word? And I know the answer to that is yes. So what is it and why?
Favorite word. I would, this is going to sound so superficial of me, but I'm going to say winning, because I like it, because it motivates me. It makes me, having a goal and trying to achieve that goal and trying to achieve it on behalf of others. It's a purpose-driven life when you have that, the winning thing that is, again, not for yourself really, but for others. So.
Well, you are no stranger to winning at multiple levels, from gold medals to creating, founding, and driving forward champion women. So the result of your winning makes you a winner, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the noun in it. And listen, I have won. The audience have won with you as our guest today. I cannot thank you enough, Nancy Hogshead, for being a guest on today's show.
Oh, Carl, thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to share, my work and passions and what I want to do out there. And you can donate to Champion Women. Go to our website. And,
well, listen, when we published a newsletter around this episode, we'll put the link to Champions Women in there. We'll put the link to Athlete A.
Athlete A, yeah.
Athlete
Yeah,
A.
the Netflix, yeah,
Right. And
special.
I'm also gonna attach the chapter you wrote for Neighbor's book because
Good.
it's so good.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you very much. All right.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thanks, Alan. Bye.
Bye.